What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the podcast. It's me, Dave, one of the pastors at Paradox Church. And today I have the honor of being with my friend, Jimmy McKee. He and his family moved to Detroit a few years back, and they lead Antioch, Detroit, which is a community in the city, really their family living on mission. And I absolutely love the way that they're doing it. I love you and your family, man. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Dave, glad to be with you.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to be jumping into celebration and holidays because it is officially the holiday season. And the way that this came about and kind of how I invited you, Jimmy, to be part of this podcast was we get together about once a month and we're sitting there at breakfast. And I want to say it was maybe around Halloween. And we were just talking about that. And I said, Halloween's not a holiday kind of thing. And you said something that really piqued my interest. You said that in our culture, we have forgotten how to celebrate, and perhaps that has something to do with the proliferation, I guess, of kind of these weird pseudo holidays that we see popping up all over the place. But I just thought, man, what an interesting concept, Jimmy. You want to talk a little bit more about what you were saying there and where that came from?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, right? Christianity, as it's kind of come into any given culture, it's always tried to take whatever the form was and recognize what things about that are ungodly and don't align with the kingdom, and then find the things that can be redeemed and kind of use those and take the Christian story and then repurpose the things of that given culture to celebrate Jesus and his coming and his resurrection. And so we kind of always have this mishmash of things that were in a given culture prior to the arrival of the message of Jesus, and then the way that those things have been transformed. And a lot of my thoughts had been around Halloween and how do we think about it as a family and how do we practice it and how do we, just trying to be a little more thoughtful. And just earlier, in October, I'm driving around the city and just seeing these, it feels like, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like the Halloween displays have gotten larger and more extravagant and more costly. And I'm thinking, I don't think that, people are converting to paganism in mass. Like, right. I don't think it's a religious thing, but I think it comes out of a desire to want to celebrate, and we've forgotten how to celebrate things that actually matter. Like meaningful things. Yeah. So, I want to take that creative energy, that celebratory desire, and put it into something that's really lighthearted and really doesn't really mean anything to me. But I don't know how to translate that into things that actually matter because I've lost touch with things that actually matter. And there's a whole movement. There's a whole undercurrent of why that is, which I can get into. But I think on the surface, I don't know how to celebrate things that matter, and I want to put my finger on something, and so why not Halloween? And it's not just Halloween, but I just was driving this morning and saw some 20-foot reindeer and Santa and snowman. I'm like, wow, that is like, I don't know what these things cost, but that's like that's extensive. Like those are some big blow up things. And is that really the purpose of this time of year? It's lighthearted, it's fun. If you whoever's listening, if you put these displays in your yard, I'm not mad at you, I'm not judging you, it's fine. But it does make me ask, what's going on underneath that, and is that really translating into celebrating things that actually matter?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I mean, when it comes to our celebrations throughout the year, right? And I love how you said that. We've forgotten how to celebrate things that actually matter, but there's this nagging sense inside of people that we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate something. So we go, I know what we'll celebrate: Irishness, whether or not I'm Irish in March, and well, how will we celebrate? Well, we'll turn everything green and we'll drink, because this is America. We're going to add that in somewhere. And I'm not going to pick on St. Patrick's Day. I mean, they're Cinco de Mayo. Like, I think it's a pretty well-established fact that Americans seem to celebrate that day way more than our Mexican neighbors do. Why? Because there's something inside of us that wants to celebrate, but we've forgotten how to do that. And on the other end of the spectrum, I think that you've had Christians, for the most part, that say, well, because we're not going to celebrate those things, so we're not going to celebrate, period.
Yeah, anything.
And so you end up with either this like celebrating meaningless things or celebrating nothing. And that's actually so far beyond. I mean, it's that's not the heart of God. That's actually not faith at all. In fact, if you look throughout the pages of Scripture, our God is the inventor of holidays. If you think about the word, it is holy day, and that doesn't mean a day to just sit around and be holy and boring. A holy day, a holiday, is actually full of celebration. That's what God ordained. If you look throughout the Old Testament, right there, God created holidays, celebrations, festivals, whether it's Passover or Pentecost or Tabernacles, and these are celebrations that reminded Israel of God's provision and His protection and His promises. Right? We also see in the New Testament, Jesus is not anti-celebration, not at all. Many people would say, "Oh, Jesus is not a partier." Well, He may not party and celebrate in the ways that you do, or on meaningless things. But Jesus, of course, what are the ways that we often go back to? People point to the wedding at Cana. Jesus' first miracle happens at a party. There's all kinds of parables that He would tell that end in celebration. The prodigal son. I mean, the father was not leaving the party that was going on inside because he was anti-party. He was actually inviting people in and saying, "Come and share in your master in our happiness. It's good. It's right for us to celebrate." So there are some things that constitute a celebration that we should celebrate, that we should find meaningful and joyful. There's something in our soul that longs for it, that needs joy and celebration, and it's actually a holy thing. It's a divine thing.
Totally. Yeah, and I think a question that I've been thinking about as it relates to this is, what are the ingredients of celebration? Because you can either kind of default into it, and it can be really surface level and kind of lacking in substance and meaning. But if you want something more than that, well, what you need, there needs to be forethought, and there needs to be initiative, and there needs to be driven by deep values. Like just the other day, one of my son had a birthday, and I've wanted to do this for a while, and I felt like it was always forced and like just wasn't a good opportunity, or I didn't feel I don't know, I just hesitated. So this is what I did, and I wrote a couple things about him that I just really love, some characteristics, some traits. And just before we ate cake, I just paused everybody and I said, "Hey, I just want to celebrate Ezra today," and I just listed some things. And it was something that actually I'd thought about it for a number of my kids' birthdays, but I needed a little bit more intentionality to actually implement like a celebration where he could be seen and acknowledged and loved by his father, among his peers and his family. And whether this is something that he remembers, forever is not the point. But it just, for me, I realized in order to celebrate him in front of this group of people, I needed to be intentional, I needed to be thoughtful, and I needed to be courageous in a way to actually step out of the flow of things and insert a high point of memorability and togetherness and pride that I could bring other people into. So I think, anyways, this like the nature of how we celebrate it, whoever's leading these places and times, like there needs to be values and intentionality, and this is for every home, right? Every parent, every person who has other people that they live with. There's a level of intentionality, and I'm sure we can get into that more. But that's just kind of, as I've thought about this more, it's like, well, there's some ingredients to the celebrating that need to be in place.
Yeah, so let's get into some of those ingredients before we unpack what it looks like for us in our families, because this is something that I think we're both practicing and trying. Some of us, me longer than others. I'm an older parent than you are, but there's reasons why, and we start to get in trouble. And I think even honestly, especially around this time of year, I think Christians can rightly look at some of the ways that our culture is quote unquote celebrating even a Christian holiday in Christmas. And just teaser, next time, after this podcast, we're going to get into a little bit of like, what is Christmas? Some people are saying that it's pagan. We're going to unpack a little bit of that. So look forward to that. But we have this Christian holiday, this time, and many Christians now are tempted to throw the baby literally out with the bathwater, and saying like, hey, we're not going to participate in that. We're not going to celebrate. And there are ingredients of celebration. And I think one of them is remembrance. Like it is an opportunity for us, and it always has been, to remember, to recall God's faithfulness. That's what Deuteronomy 16:12 says. Just look back to Psalm 77. I love the word that you used. It's one of our family values: intentionality, actively. We can say all day long that we want to do things, but until we put it on the calendar, until we make a plan, until we say this is the flesh of the incarnation, right? Of what we're going to do, how we're going to make it real and tangible, then it's just an idea, and probably it's not going to happen. We should be able to look back and look forward. And some of these things are traditions, like, oh yeah, I remember that we would do this. Why would we do this? This is so much of Deuteronomy is like, remember, and teach your children why. Tell them the stories, talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, we lose something when we focus in on the tradition itself and not on why we're doing this and what we're remembering. Tell those stories. Talk about why it's meaningful.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on remembrance?
And work, just to tee off of that, like that takes work for whoever is the parent, whoever is the leader, whoever's the one initiating things. You have to have your own carved out space of reflection and thoughtfulness to be able to then bring that back into the group, into the family, to bring everybody else into the remembrance. So if we don't have that front end work of reflection to then be able to bring everybody else into it, I think that's part of the place that we're in as a culture. We don't have are not very good at doing the back end work of reflecting and finding the way that this ties into the bigger story. And I think if I can, this is where my mind went in terms of this whole conversation, right? The air that we breathe culturally, can be called this postmodern kind of zeitgeist or spirit of the age. And the phrase that captured, and this is just my own kind of analysis, it's not my own words, but take it for what it is. It's some famous philosopher called it incredulity towards meta narrative, or disbelief of bigger stories. So this is like the culture of our society is skeptical of a bigger story. And whether that's you or not, the air we breathe as a culture lives in that. And so part of attributing meaning is tying it back into something that matters, which is a bigger story. But if I live in a culture that's constantly undercutting and disbelieving that we are a part of a bigger story, then I'm actually getting, whether I see it or not, I'm getting swept up into that as well. That I'm actually breathing the air of disbelief of a bigger story. And so how do I attribute meaning to a holiday or to a time of celebration if I can't tie it back in to a bigger story that we're a part of? And so that means I have to kind of create my own story, and that's producing all sorts of anxiety and ungroundedness, because I can't do that, because I didn't just plop here. I came from somewhere and I'm going somewhere. And so it's helpful, I think, to name kind of where we're at and why this is a difficulty for us. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been a difficulty in the past, but I think it's a unique challenge in our present day and age because of just the air, again, that air that we breathe as a culture that's skeptical of a story that makes sense of the universe, a story that makes sense of our place in it. And so then that's where, okay, I can't get into all that. I can't get to the bottom of that. I'll just celebrate these things that are, again, really lacking in substance and meaning.
Yeah, I think it's so appropriate that you brought that up, man. And I'm glad that you did. I would even say there may be many people that are listening that are skeptical of a bigger story, but I think that what you're saying even just sheds light on our propensity to forget that we are a part of a bigger story, and we get so caught up in the daily ongoings of our life and the things that are happening and our stresses and our anxieties and our everything else,
Yeah.
that we forget there's something bigger that we're a part of. There's something bigger going on. God's presence, God's kingdom is active, alive, well, and holidays actually call us to remember that.
Yes.
And to reorient our, like, oh yeah, this is, I mean, you can do this in a small way. We'll get to this a little bit later, but even, all right, we have annually a time of Thanksgiving, but I mean, scientists, doctors will tell you just how healthy and beneficial it is for you to take some time every single day and zoom out and go, all right, what am I thankful for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just want to start my day with a journal. That's what the Psalms say. You know, enter God's courts. You know, with thanksgiving,
Yeah.
with praise, just to remind yourself, all right, there is a God. He's in control. He's good. Like, and I'm okay. I'm part of something bigger. There is something bigger. Holidays are a time that, you know, our celebrations are a time to look back on that and go, oh yeah, I know that this one might be hard. We always have that come up, you know, like, oh, remember that there's people that are really struggling, and we should. That's scriptural. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
But we can also remember that there is another day, that there is something bigger, and we don't have to push people or rush them through that. But it's a good opportunity for us to remember God's faithfulness, His goodness, His kingdom, His presence, His reality, and His story. It also, doing things like that will bring us to a place of rest and renewal. So there's remembrance. There's also rest and renewal. I think that it's appropriate, honestly, that we call these things Christmas break. It's a break, or Christmas vacation, right? That's what Sabbaths and festivals were actually intended to do. It's a time to pause and recharge spiritually and physically. Celebration is meant to combat burnout and help us refocus on God. And yet, how many of us already, I mean, the Christmas season has barely even begun, and many of us are already burnt out and exhausted from it, you know, because, here's the two words, the hustle and the bustle, right? It's supposed to be a time of rest, a time of renewal, a time where I have this actual tangent, Jimmy, and you can jump in here with your own, but one of my absolute favorite nights of the entire year is Christmas Eve. And we always, you know, here at the church, we have a Christmas Eve service, 7:00 if you're looking for one. But afterwards, when everyone else is cleared out, it's like this one time of the year when the building is completely dark. It's completely quiet. And there's just, you know, some Christmas lights on, glowing with the trees. And I always love just taking a second to stop. And before me and my family leave, I look around and I just kind of breathe in and breathe out and go, all right, we can rest now. Peace on earth. Like there's peace. This is a silent night. It's a holy night. It's good. It's good to just stop and rest and enjoy.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, do you experience holidays as or celebrations as hustle and bustle more, or are you able to find some degree of rest and renewal?
Yeah, I think we've kind of found our footing in some of this and gotten better at it through the years. But it makes me, some of what you're saying, just we can look at the high moments of holidays and kind of these ascend the hill moments, right? I say that Jerusalem was on a hill, so every couple times a year the Jews of the surrounding areas would have to go up, ascend the hill to get to Mount Zion, Jerusalem. And that was a pattern, right? There's the ascend the hill holiday moments, but then there's just that like you said, that regular rhythm. And if I can cultivate an ability to stop and to Sabbath and to rest in normal time, then I can have a little bit of my feet under me for these bigger moments. Because I think sometimes we can go on a holiday or go on a break, but my mind doesn't know how to stop. So I gravitate again towards meaningless scrolling, or towards checking email that I've already checked 20 times, or towards just random stuff that doesn't actually matter. Because why? I don't know how to actually stop and be with my family or be with my loved ones or my friends, because that's too hard, or what. There's reasons for that we can get into, I'm sure, but because that's challenging and I haven't maybe given the forethought to that, now I'm here, I'm supposed to be resting, But how do I do that? I think that's another part of the question of just the practicals. How do we celebrate? How do we rest? Again, in the weekly rhythm, smaller times, which then help us have more, again, feet under us and purpose in those bigger times.
Yeah, I love that you brought back Sabbath, man, because it's one of those, we have these regular times that should be celebration, but I'm going to say them, and they will probably even feel like not celebration, right? How many of us hear a daily time with God and just think party time, joy, right? No, instead it's become work. It's like, oh, I have to wake up, I have to read the Bible, I have to. It just feels almost like, oh gosh, well, who would want to do that? Why do you want to start your day that way? Or Sabbath, it's like, oh, okay, I have to not do all the things I want to do or need to do and just go to church and sit around and read the Bible all day long. Jesus said, no, the Sabbath was actually made for you. It's a gift, like, come on. And these are times to enjoy God, to enjoy life. There should be life-givingness to it. And Jesus says that he is the source of all joy and all life. In him, there is life and life to the full. So why we think that in order to live it, we have to actively avoid him, whether it's in our day or in our week or in our holidays. Like, listen, I mean, chestnuts roasting on an open fire has got nothing on Jesus. Like, we should be the ones that are proclaiming that are celebrating this. We've got the best story to remember. We have the source of rest and renewal. And also, God gives us family. God gives us relationships. God gives us church. And many times we approach holidays as opportunities now, especially if we're going to rest and renew, right? Many of us are so connected to the world, at least in part because of social media, but we're so busy. We're so overloaded that all we want to do in order to rest and renew is get away, especially if it comes to some of our family, maybe family that have hurt us in the past, or where there's strained relationship, or maybe we voted differently a couple weeks ago or something like. And we forget that family is actually a good gift from God, and there might be some difficulty, there might be some pain, but celebrations are actually a way to gather and grow closer as a family of believers. It may be a time to be with someone with whom you disagree, and learn to coexist, and it's definitely a time to gather with the church. I mean, early Christians practiced joyful fellowship. Look through Acts 2:42-47, where it's like they're getting together and every believer is full of awe and joy as they're gathering together to celebrate. So community and connection is a big part. It's a reason to get together. And typically, whether you have left a job or left a fantasy football league, I think about that. Like, every year we have this reason to get together as a fantasy league, and it's to draft, and it's a joyful day. But part of being in a community is that now, and holidays, it's a reason to get together. It's a reason to increase your relationship, because you have to, and you wouldn't necessarily choose to, but once you do, many times you end up glad that you did.
Yeah.
Is community a big part of celebrations for you?
Yeah, my mind's kind of going in a couple of directions. I think when it comes to celebration and kind of that core, that bedrock of meaning and the reason why we celebrate anything, let alone holidays. You kind of have your faith. You have your faith community. You have your people who are like, we are on the same page in terms of the story that we're in, and reminding ourselves and reminding each other of our place in it and God's purposes to bring us together and all these things. And then you have like your world of work. Maybe you have a holiday party when you're like, I don't even really like these people. I get along with some of them, but not all of them. And I don't really trust the leaders or whatever. Like, God has purpose in that time. And I think a part of it is like our own agency as ambassadors for Jesus in the world, that these celebrations that are not maybe the core of our life, those are actually valuable, that God has us there to engage, to actually celebrate the things that matter and bring our values into them. That doesn't mean we're, totally rejecting everything that doesn't like shout loudly for Jesus, but it means there's purpose in the relationship of coming together. And then, like you said, extended family. I think of my own extended family, and we get together for Christmas, and really Jesus is not in the mix in terms of the aroma of the time, but that's not a judgment. It's just not a strong Christian extended family. And so then it's, rather than saying, oh, why am I here? It's actually, God, what are you doing here? And how can you give me eyes to see and celebrate that you're actually redeeming, that you're at work in my family? That, God, would you use me to love my family? Would you use me to be in these spaces to be glad to see people who maybe don't often have people who are glad to see them? Like there's a total reframing of our celebrations, even as we come together with extended family, that can be very redemptive if we can recognize that God is at work in and through us as we go to these family holidays. But again, there's that back end work to actually be kind of on the same page with the Spirit, coming into these family gatherings and saying, hey, I'm not just here to default to the lowest common denominator of kind of apathy and a few drinks. I'm actually here to enjoy myself, enjoy my family, but have my eyes open to the ways that God is working and how I can partner with him in those places. So that's kind of where my mind's at. It's like there's the faith. It's like, hey, we're all on the same page. There's work stuff where I kind of tempted to disengage. And then there's family stuff, which I can't totally pull back from, but I can either sink to the lowest common denominator or rise to this place of saying, God, you're at work here. You've put me in this family. How can I represent you and love my family well?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about we were able to spend the week together just a couple of weeks ago now in Austria with our gathering of churches, and one of the leaders of our family of churches, our movement, said, hey, we never felt like we had the family that we wanted, so we set out to build the family that we needed. Or maybe it was the opposite way. We didn't have the family we needed, so we built the family that we wanted. Yeah. And I think that pretty much everybody could say on some level, like, yeah, they wish that maybe family relationships were a little bit different. Maybe there was different traditions, especially if you're coming from a place of faith and your family celebration is not. But there are some things that, God placed you where you are in this time, in this place, in these relationships, for a purpose. And I even think of, one of our family traditions is we go up north to my family's place every single summer. And it's a wonderful time, like with our family. But we found that we wanted to start one of our other values as a family is just adventure. Like we wanted to go out and have adventures. And so I started doing it. I just started doing it. I said, hey, I'm going on a hike right now. Does anybody want to come? Hey, we're planning a trip up to the waterfall. Does anybody else want to come and swim? Maybe that's part of what God wants to do in your family is through you. So instead of withdrawing to celebrate on your own, like bring the party. Yeah. Bring the party with you. If there's a particular bourbon that you love, maybe you bring it. If you would, I've started bringing a board game or something. Hey, bring the board game. Bring Settlers of Catan. That's what I want to do. So bring the fun and invite some other people into it. And you can even say like, all right, well, that's all like fun stuff. What about the spiritual celebration? All right, most of us are going to get together and sit around a table for Thanksgiving, and maybe you'll even go around the table and say something that you're thankful for. But what if you just asked a question even? And maybe it's around the table, maybe it's personally after, hey, is there one characteristic of God that you're thankful for? What's one thing you love about him? Or, hey, as you look back over the past year, what's something that you're thankful that God did? Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a hard thing, but it's there. How do you see God? And in these ways, we can start to shift the story. And again, go back to remembering, why are we celebrating? What are we remembering here today? And with some of the joy, like, all right, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to bring in some fun. Like, it's going to be fun. People like to have fun. Everybody does, you know, and then who? You can start to ask the who of, well, who am I going to share this with? Who will I celebrate with? Most people want deep connection, relationships, family, but there's very few people, very few that go out and build family. Most people want to belong in one, but very few family builders. So go out there and be a family builder.
Yeah.
Start a new tradition, you know, like tell the story, bring God in to your celebration if you don't like where it's at. All right, well, I'm getting really practical. Let's go kind of with this though. Like there's daily things that we've talked about. There's milestones that we want to celebrate, and then there's kind of seasonal holiday type celebration. I'd love to spend just a few minutes, like let's practically flesh this out. What are some of the ways that you or your family celebrate daily or weekly, kind of regularly in the middle of everyday life?
You're talking just in normal time.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's ebb and flow in, you know, consistency, intentionality, but one bedrock, and we mentioned it earlier, of our lives since we got married and kind of I was in seminary and talking about some of these ideas, trying to find out how to implement them in a busy kind of school season. But it was just the Sabbath. So for us, it's Friday, it's a Saturday, because, you know, Sundays are a little bit different with ministry and things, but it's this Friday night. Everyone, you know, we're together. Sometimes we'll light a candle. Again, there's consistency. It's like, it's not always what like the perfect ideal situation, but it's just, hey, let's think about the week. Let's talk about what we're thankful for from the week. We're all together. We usually there's a movie. Now that it's getting colder, we like to start a fire. We got a little fireplace, so we'll start a fire. It's just trying to find these points of enjoyment. Like, how can we enjoy each other and enjoy God and open our doors? Sometimes there's people who are eating with us, so it's like, hey, come on over. The food will be hot. You can join us. So that's a kind of a weekly rhythm of celebration as a family. And I think honestly, it starts with the daily, like the joy in the Lord and connection with Him, and then just like, I'm glad to be with you. Like, this is something I've intentionally done with our kids. Is I'm usually up. My office is like next to the bedrooms, and so I can hear them get up, and I'll say, "Who's that?" And they'll kind of peek around the corner. I say, "Come here, give me a morning hug." And it's just like there's a celebration in the morning hug. Like, I'm glad that you're up. I'm glad that you're here. And that for me is a genuine, like, as a father, I love you, and I just want to start your day knowing that I'm happy to see you. And so give me a morning hug. And that's a daily thing. And then the weekly would be the Sabbath. And then obviously there's seasonal things and other high points of birthdays and other celebration points.
Wow, man. That is so beautiful and powerful. Just the I'm glad to be with you, and the celebration of a morning hug. I mean, that's how simple that celebration can be. Like, let's celebrate the morning with a morning hug. I absolutely love that, man. Yeah, we're in our house. We're similar. I mean, our Sabbath is Friday evening to Saturday evening as well. And Friday, we don't call it. We have started calling it Sabbath, so that our kids know what we're doing and what we're practicing. But they've always known it as Friday night is family night, and we try very hard. And on nights or weeks when Friday night is not a possibility, we'll try to reschedule it. And on the rare, it's a rare occasion where we just go, that's all right. This is a different week. You know, it's the exception. Exceptions should be exceptions, though. I mean, on the vast majority of Fridays, we are doing something that we're all looking forward to. We're eating something that we all want to eat. Yeah. There's other times throughout the week where I'm going to make you eat your peas. But on Friday night, we're eating pizza or tacos or burgers, like something that we want to eat. And it's good and it's delicious. We're going to play a game or watch a movie or go for a bike ride or do something fun together as a family. And my kids can bank on it. They know it's Friday. Yeah. We're going to celebrate. You know, like Saturday morning, this is the only morning where all of us really are together and have the time to sit down and have a bigger breakfast, you know, and not, all right, we got to get going to school. Like we have breakfasts together-ish on most days. and we'll do some prayer time and things. I could talk about what that looks like in a different podcast. But you know what brings me joy? Bacon. I'm making the bacon and the eggs, like pancakes with chocolate chips on Saturday morning. And then we sit down together and we talk about our week, and we do a little bit of a devotion. We have these fun conversation cards where, hey, what's your dream vacation? We try to just celebrate and enjoy together. One of the things, I'll be honest, you know what brings rest and joy to my kids on a Saturday? Playing video games. We love it. And you know what? Having your kids play video games is not so bad for parents either. That can be very restful and enjoyable.
Well, it helps to have a window around celebration. Like there's the everyday, but then I mean you and I are on the same page with Sabbath. I'm not going to let my kids play video games every day. We're not going to have pancakes with chocolate chips every day. But there's an inflection point where there's some freedom to just enjoy the good things without kind of the health conscious kind of well, that's too much sugar, or that's too much, like that's most life, but on this day or on this time we can go all out, and the kids look forward to that, and we look forward to that, and there's a bit of freedom inside the context of a disciplined life.
Sure.
Down and enjoy and celebrate just God's goodness and trusting in Him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that actually could even speak to a little bit of what we're talking about with this lost art of celebration, is that when life is hedonism and everything is a celebration, every day is a day that's designed for me to enjoy, eat, drink, and be merry. Well, now when everything is special, nothing is special.
Yeah.
My kids will actually call it on weekends. They say, "Can we have a special drink?" And that's like something sugary, something good. I go out and I grab a Mountain Dew, and they'll say, "Can we have a special drink?" And many times, honestly, on most days, they will ask for a special drink. And what I've actually started even saying to them is, if you have it every day, it's not a special drink anymore.
Yep.
It's not special. There has to be some degree of, we're not celebrating now, and we are celebrating at this time. I know. I just heard of this. I love this tradition. This is a simple joy. I know a family that has started Thirsty Thursdays, and it happened because he was tired of being asked for a Slurpee every single day. So he decided Thursdays are the day. Yeah. Thursday Slurpee day, and it's become a thing in their family, like a joyful celebration. My kids, of course, said, "Can we do that?" Well, you don't have to push all that hard to get me to get a Slurpee, but okay. So just awesome. Little joy-filled celebrations, but there's bigger ones too. Like we're going to want to mark milestones. So probably the biggest one, the most familiar one, would be anniversaries, birthdays, things like that. But even look culturally, we've turned the big things into, all right, you're 16, you can drive, or here's the big one, you're 21, you can drink. That's what we celebrate. So how do we, again, remember that we're part of a bigger, more meaningful story as Christians, and say, all right, when did you decide to start following Jesus? Do you make that a big deal? I mean, we've written down, like, it's hard sometimes because you're like, oh, I don't know, was that it, with your kids? But we wrote it down and we're like, hey, you know what? We know that this is a journey and a process, but this was an important step in yours. Yeah. This was the day that you said it. And so we just celebrate that. We remind them of who they are. I think you mentioned birthdays, man. Like on our kids' birthdays too, we blow up all these balloons, we put them in their room, we make it fun, but then we'll also take some time to share the story of their birth and who they are, and speak life into them and encourage them and make it more than just, this is when I eat cake and buy stuff. Yeah. There's big things. Anniversary weekend. I've talked about that. That is me and Gwen's, I think it's our favorite weekend of the entire year. We've always made it a big deal. Our kids see it. They know it. We get away and we celebrate our marriage and we spend time together. And I love it. It is just, it's my favorite weekend of the year, but we even celebrate, honestly, it sounds funny, but we celebrate death. There are people that have gone before us. Gwen's dad being one of them. And every year on the anniversary of that, we don't just sit around and be sad, but we make the cookies that he would have made, and we love him. We listen to some of his favorite music. Maybe we go outside and go on a walk. We share some of the stories. Those are ways that we can just incorporate some milestones into our life. Anything else come to mind?
Well, I'm just struck by that last piece there. I think that there's so much there for so many people. That's, just celebrating those who've gone. That just makes me. I want to think more about that, because that's so beautiful. Often, what you hear from grandparents or people who've lost a spouse or lost a loved one, it's like you feel like, I don't want to talk about it because it's going to bring up the pain. The pain's already there. You bringing it up actually brings me joy, and actually brings me fondness of those times, versus we can kind of get it backwards. I just love that, man. That's really inspiring. Yeah, I think that kind of is. I mean, we're nothing too much more coming to mind in terms of the everyday sort of stuff, and then obviously there's the holidays and trying to bring more meaning into that. And so we do. We've done this for the last couple of years. And again, so much of what we're talking about is kids stuff, but it's stuff that anybody could do. It just happens to be when you have children, you have to a little bit more regimented around it. But Advent is a thing for us. So we have these little cartoon Advent cards with a couple questions on the back. Well, we'll turn off all the lights, kind of that starting that first day, and we'll light a couple candles and say it. Have a card that we read off some scriptures, and then it's usually like a very, very simple 2 or 3 words. Like, here's what's taking us through this whole 25 days, so that we can be very memorable and easy to follow, from oldest to youngest, with a bit of a culmination on that Christmas Eve, Christmas Day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you got into that, because that's really kind of what we're talking about here today. Like the holidays. I love that we're actually pretty rare here in America in the 21st century. We're among the first that have not ordered our lives around a church calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that it's just fall or winter. Like, part of the calendar is like there's seasons,
mm-hmm.
there's rhythms to life. And now we're entering into the season called Advent. And it's a time when we tell our souls, it's time to be peaceful. It's time to be hopeful. It's time to be joyful. It's time to be expectant.
Mm-hmm.
And we can put practices in that. An Advent calendar is a great way to remember that. To kind of practice that. I mean, we've added every day when our kids open up the next thing. It's not just like, ooh, candy. We try to say Christmas is coming, Jesus comes soon. So we're pointing again, like this joy that we feel, like it's going to be made complete. Yeah. This is what we're anticipating. This is what we're longing for. But there's less holy things that you can even do to just celebrate this and make this a season of celebration. I mean, we just put up our Christmas decorations. That's not like a quick let's get it done thing around in our house.
Yeah.
We make that a day where it's like, all right, we're getting out this stuff. Our Christmas tree, for example, I don't know, I don't know, take it for what it's worth. It's not my idea, it's God's. I honestly think instead of just getting a tree with ornaments, every year we've just kind of started this tradition where we go to Bronner's and we buy a Christmas ornament that we feel represents something that happened in our lives, and all the kids get to do it, or something that was true, or the kids, it's like, all right, soccer this year, cool, it's soccer. But this year, Gwen and I made sure to buy one from Austria because, like, wow, this was a big thing in our life. Or when we went on our first mission trip to Puerto Rico, we got one of those. And so now when we put up our tree, we take a moment, like every ornament we get out, it is a reminder of God's goodness.
Yeah.
It's actually become an overwhelming kind of practice for us to go, wow, God has been good to us. Look at this tree, full of his goodness.
That's so cool because it layers, right? Especially when you practice these things year after year. Now it isn't just a one-time thing that we have a couple ornaments that we remember, but it layers on top of each other and creates like just a depth of significance because of the history to it. And that's what it's meant to be. Like all these celebrations that God institutes in the Bible and the way he's with us and he works through the holidays that we have, and particularly the kind of the Christian high points in the calendar, is recognizing that God, you've been faithful from that point that we rehearse every Sunday in Scripture, all the way through the centuries, all the way into my life, there's a history to it, and I can have these little Ebenezers of remembrance to your faithfulness through the years. And that's why these holidays can be such a time of celebration, because God continues to be faithful to his promises, to everything he's has done in our lives, and bringing us into his story, which is so much better than the stories that we can create for ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's this time of joy and celebration. So at some point, again, as you approach this holiday season, and hopefully, and any and everyone, what's the story that you're telling? What's the one that you're living out? Remember that, and try intentionally, actively. Deuteronomy would say diligently. How can we really make sure this is not just about the cultural stuff? This is going to take some work, whether you have kids or don't, to enter into a different story.
Yeah. And I think on that note, it's just like admitting, like, we are forgetful people. We constantly forget the goodness of God. We almost always forget the good things. We low slip through our fingers. We can much better rehearse the negative things, the bad things. But we need these set points to remember, because we always forget. And so there's a humbling point to it. Like, I'm actually not good at remembering on a daily basis or all these other things. So I need these places of stability, these anchor points in my year to remember, and bring with community, with family, to remember what's happened, what this inflection point in the story is, because otherwise I lose my footing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be my encouragement, honestly, as we enter into Thanksgiving and the Advent season. Take some time, maybe over this extended weekend, to just say, hey, why are we celebrating? What are we remembering? How are we going to be intentional about that story over the course of the next month or so? And then take some time to go, well, how are we going to do that? Let's make a plan. When are we going to do that? Put it on the calendar. I make Gwen put cookie baking on the calendar because I want cookies.
Yeah.
Right? So if it doesn't get on the calendar, it's not going to happen.
I'm going to have to do it because I need you to do that.
Right. Exactly. So why are we celebrating? What are we remembering? How and when are we going to celebrate that? And then finally, make some plans. Who are you going to celebrate with? Invite some other people into the story with you. That is actually part of why we're celebrating, part of our call as Christians here on earth. Well, thank you so much, man, Jimmy. Any final word before we break?
Actually, the last thing you said, that's where my mind goes, right? Jesus is like, invite the stranger, invite the lonely, invite, like if you've got people in your life, man, bring them in to the family, and be glad to see them. There's so much joy in the house of the Lord as we bring people together.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jimmy. Really appreciate you. You can find more about Jimmy, his family, and the work that they're doing in Detroit at AntiochDetroit.org. That is ANTIOCH Detroit.org. He's Jimmy. I'm Dave. You are loved, though, just as you are, not as you should be. But remember, Jesus loves you too much to let you stay that way. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next time.